Hey kids, so we're on another embargo video. Today we're going to be talking about the Lumix S1 Mark II, not the S1R2, not the S1H2, although some of you guys are anticipating that, but we are going to go over a showcase of this camera. I think it's pretty solid and a sensor that isn't often used. We did take a trip to Austin, Texas to go and figure this thing out, but I decided to come back to Toronto for a little bit extra, but well, we'll get there. Okay. Yeah, so you know what this video is. It's an embargo video, which means there's a lot of people that are making this type of content, but we're going to go into some disclosure. Yes, I was in Austin, Texas with a bunch of other creators to test out the S1 Mark II. There's a bunch of other stuff as well that we are going to talk about in this video, but absolutely, they did pay for my trip. They did pay for my hotel stay. I might have paid a little bit extra to get some more footage, but nonetheless, the majority of the trip was paid for by Lumix. Now, I can't exchange that trip for cash. I couldn't necessarily get cash back, even for this camera. Hang on a sec. There's a little like serial number at the bottom here, so even if I try to sell it to somebody, it literally says sample with a serial number at the bottom. I would probably get in a lot of trouble trying to get rid of this thing. So a lot of the things that Lumix has given us and the resources to make this video can't change out for cash, but at the same time, it was an incentive for me to make this embargo video in the first place. Also, the fact that people watch a lot of embargo reviews on the day of, that also helps as well. Now, I actually don't have another sponsor of this video, so for the most part, you're just gonna hear me yap about the S1 II. Now, one thing I also wanna add in as well is one thing you wanna consider is watching multiple videos. You're gonna see a ton of different videos on your home feed. But in my personal opinion, buying a house, a wedding ring, and a car are gonna be expensive things, and a camera's pretty much right after that. By all means, do what you want, do whatever you want with that disclosure, but I'm going to say Lumix did send us on a trip. We did test out this camera. I don't know when I get to bring this back or when I have to bring this back, but there's also other goodies in this video as well. Now, if you're looking at the S1 II and you wonder, hey, Kofi, that looks like the S1R2, it's because their bodies are exactly the same. You're going to be able to have two bodies that you can use the same cages on, the same accessories, and not have to worry about having different things for different looking camera bodies. In fact, sometimes you can get these two quite confused pretty easily. I did a video on the S1R2 just a couple of months ago. We went through all the different body design differences from a camera like this from something like maybe the S5IIX. There's a bunch of new things from the flippy screen, the custom dials, the custom locking button, where you can go to the mode dial switch. All of those things are in that video, so you guys can check that out because it might not be useful going through it all again. Now, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of the body design and all the software and stuff, but we will go into that later. It's the same as the S1R2, and there's also a couple of new things coming with it. We're going to talk about image quality. Now, I've been shooting a lot of different scenarios. I've been shooting a lot with the S1 II over the last 3 weeks or close to a month, and I'm going to say that the image quality looks great. Despite the fact that it's only 420, I've never really had a problem with the color coming out of the S1 II or the S1R2 as well. And I do feel like both of them do have that special sauce in terms of the color, the roll-off, the sharpness, and just how everything looks overall. I've shot in a variety of different lenses between my Blazar lenses, some of the L-mount stuff, and L-mount lenses we'll talk about a little bit later, but I think both of these look really great. Image quality is going to be more of a subjective thing. However, one thing I want to comment on is just how much Lumix was able to squeeze out of this sensor. Now, there's only one semi-stacked sensor around, and one is on the Z6 III, so I can only assume that this is going to be the same one. However, I do like the image quality coming out of this camera. You don't necessarily need to shoot RAW in order to get a great image, although it's a really nice thing to have. But overall, in the situation that I've been shooting on, which was quite a lot of them, I think the image quality looked great, and some of you guys might approve of that, and some of you guys might not like that, but it's all subjective, and I don't know, you're probably gonna tell me in the comments anyways. Okay, so right now we are filming on the S1 Mark II. Got myself a little ND filter on it here. Usually for me with autofocusing tests, I'm magnificently melanated, and if autofocusing doesn't work on here, well, then I can't really use the camera's autofocus, especially because this might be a hybrid camera that I'll use quite often. Now, I'm just gonna kind of walk around the frame here. I'm not gonna record the box on it here. If you could see the autofocus, well, then it's working. And if it kind of cuts out or it doesn't work at all, you'll probably let me know in the comments, or I'll put like a little subtitle over here. Now, you can use autofocus on trains, planes, automobiles, cats, even some other things as well, including one mode that I'm just gonna call the diversity mode. Okay, so we're at the studio right now. We're gonna be testing out a new autofocusing mode on the S1 II called Urban Sports. Lumix, what does that even mean? But now from what I understand, urban sports mode basically is an autofocusing mode that accounts for the fact where the human or the subject doesn't necessarily stand up upright, which makes a lot of sense, especially if you do things like b-boying, breakdancing, or anything of the sort. So it makes a lot of sense that that's going to be something where I'm going to test out this mode for. Now we're going to go to voiceover mode right now just to see how this holds up, because I can't really tell anything on a tiny screen, but once we blow this thing up, I'll be able to tell you if this is a mode actually worth using. This is kind of a weird choice by Lumix. I guess there was a need for b-boys to have autofocusing modes, but it's a little bit different than human auto tracking focus. What I'm assuming is that most of the algorithms for autofocus assume that you're going to be standing upright or you're in normal body positions, where if you're looking at the footage right now, clearly Jarek is not. So in order to track down people moving very quickly and changing elevations in terms of where their body position is, this mode actually holds up, but in other modes doesn't work the best. But it works really well in this situation. Now I'm going to split up the shooting modes into two different categories. One that's going to be more favorable to spherical lenses, and the other one that's going to be more favorable to, well, anamorphic. You already know where this is going to go. Now, in terms of the spherical lenses, you're going to get pretty much every shooting mode. You get pretty much every shooting mode in both of them, but there are a couple of things that you need to know. For one is you could shoot in 6K open gate. Shocker. You could shoot up to 30 frames a second, which is something that you can do with almost every Lumix camera nowadays, but there's a little bit more. You're going to get a mode that's going to be 5.1K and 4.8K at the same time. Now, you might be wondering why you get these, and I'm a little bit confused myself, but I will tell you this. In 5.1K, you can shoot open gate at 60 frames a second. This is one of the very few cameras that not only can shoot open gate, but also can shoot open gate at 60 frames a second. The only other camera that I have that's not over $10,000 to have that can do that is the Blackmagic Pixis, which means if you're someone who likes to shoot in anamorphic slow motion, and maybe you want to shoot out in the desert like Cam Mackie does, then you can shoot in 5.1 60 frames a second. Now, we're going to keep this spherical as well, because you are still going to get a 3:2 ratio at 5.1K just like 6K, so if you are using a lens like a DZO Vespid Prime, you are still going to get that 3:2 square. And if you want to get a different square, I guess is what I'm going to call it, you could also shoot in 4:3 as well. Now, there's going to be a variety of different reasons why you would shoot in 4:3 at 60 frames a second, ones that I actually don't know, so you'll probably leave in the comments down below, but you do get the aspect ratio of 4:3 and 4.8K. I'm assuming the fact that you have to downsample and downres the sensor means you're going to get a bunch of different shooting modes and capabilities, which is something that the Nikon Z6 III can't do, but the Lumix S1 can. See what I mean about using the same sensor and doing different things? And then we're going to talk about anamorphic shooting. Now, with anamorphic shooting, you guys should know by now that you are going to de-squeeze your footage, and it's going to give you a little bit more width while still keeping a really good depth of field. Now, typically for me, I am going to just shoot my open gate mode, so all of those modes are going to be the same, whether you're shooting an anamorphic or spherical. I spent a lot of time on the Blazar Remus lenses, and also I got to test out the Blazar Mantis as well. Shout out to Chris Brockers for that. Speaking of Chris Brockers, well, okay, so I don't know if you guys know this, but this is a double embargo day. So, Chris, what are we rocking with today?
We have right down here the Mavic 4 Pro, which has a ton of new features, 8 key standout features. Well, maybe 7 now, I think, but I've forgotten. 51-minute battery life. You got LiDAR right here. So you can fly in very, very low light environments with obstacle avoidance. You've got 3 lenses on here, D-Log in all the lenses, and 4K 100 in the tele, 6K 60 in the wide, which is a 28mm. I believe it's a 28mm, I can't remember the middle one, and like a 170mm. All kinds of sensors everywhere, but the big thing we've had a lot of fun with is the AI tracking, so points. You can, I don't think it's even AI, it's just point tracking, but you can select a bunch of different points and it will just track it without you having to do anything. You can still fly the drone to track vehicles, that kind of thing, but it's pretty wild doing that. It's fun.
Today's actually going to be a double embargo day. Not only has the S1 II released, but also the DJI Mavic 4 Pro. We got to test this guy out, and I do have a video probably coming out like tomorrow, because, you know, I don't want to release 2 embargo videos on the same day. But the Mavic 4 Pro is insane, and it kind of feels like a flying GH7, mostly because we're talking about Lumix cameras, the micro four thirds sensor in the Mavic 4. It does kind of feel like you're using a flying GH7. That's all I'm going to say. A bunch of really cool features, and I don't want to ruin the surprise, but in that same vein of talking about Chris Brockers using the Mavic 4, well, this happened too. So you might be wondering why we're over here. It's because Chris made a little bit of a whoopsie, and he has to explain to these guys what happened. Have fun, guys. If you guys can't find it or you fall in, I can't save you. So Chris is over there. He might have lost the drone. He flew it into a tree. So now they're taking this little paddle boat and they're gonna try to find it. Uh-oh. I think the current got them. So Chris lost the drone. We were flying around, we were getting our first shot in, and something happened. No way, we actually found this drone. That's wild. Okay, hang on one sec. So one of these nice neighbors might have found the drone. Well, that's a relief. Okay, so while we were trying to get a tracking shot flying the Mavic 4, which is gonna come out the same time as this video, Chris flew into a tree. And I mean, what's cool about that, for one, is that we actually found it again, but two, I'm the more responsible YouTuber on this embargo release. So DJI, next time you wanna send someone a drone, I won't crash it. If you watch his video, you'll know that it actually did survive. If you want to check that out, it's going to be over here. Now, the S1ii does have a dual base ISO. Now, despite the fact that it is the same sensor, or theoretically the same sensor as the Z6 III, it's actually not the same in terms of its ISO value. The S1ii has a 640 and a 5000 ISO at the dual base, which means that you're going to get the most dynamic range on one of the two circuits, depending on which one you go to. It's kind of a weird, complicated way of explaining it, but just basically saying that if you're going to use one ISO between 640, if you have to go a little bit higher, just go up to 5000, ND your way down if it's too bright, or you're in the right place at 5000. Now, we are going to talk about these two modes in two different scenarios, one that's going to be in daylight, and also we have our low light test a bit later. But it is nice that a lot of cameras these days do have dual base ISO, except this one has a third one in one particular mode that I'm going to hold your hand through. Now, the S1ii also does have its own version of dynamic range boost mode. It's not dynamic range expansion like the S1R2, because I learned that those are both different. In dynamic range boost mode on the S1ii, it's similar to having a DJI sensor like you would have on the Canon C70. I don't necessarily think those are exact same things, because I think you need two different sensors, but I think the mode actually emulates that. Now, in terms of dynamic range, the S1ii has quite a lot of it. In fact, throughout testing and trying to figure out where it breaks down in its dynamic range, I had a really hard time trying to do that. Generally speaking, if I'm trying to expose for people's skin while also keeping in the skies, I shot at high noon and gave it a shot, and it still was able to keep details in the shadows without blowing out the skies. And now I don't feel like a character that needs to be unlocked at a Mortal Kombat while I'm shooting outside. Now, this is the part where I'm going to hold your hand through this. Now, in dynamic range boost mode, you are going to get an extra stop. However, fun fact, the S1ii does have more dynamic range than the S1R2 by about a stop. So the S1ii, technically speaking, has as much dynamic range as using the expansion mode on the S1R2, and also has a boost mode itself to bring it one stop further. This is something I'm going to tell you. I want to say it slowly. I want to hold your hand even through this. If you don't want rolling shutter, don't use this mode. Don't use this mode shooting in handheld. Don't use this in shooting super fast objects. You'll be fine with the dynamic range that you have, turning the boost mode off. If you turn the boost mode on and then you start shooting in handheld and you notice rolling shutter, myself and everybody else told you so, like right here. No one's hiding it. It's a thing that's there. You don't have to use it, but if you want to put things on sticks and you need that extra stop, it'll work great. If you are going to shoot fast-moving objects where you're going to see rolling shutter, don't bother. And also, you have enough dynamic range already. It'll be fine. Okay, so this is the part where we talk about things that are going to happen with the S1ii that haven't happened yet, but they are coming in a very soon firmware update. We didn't have to mention these things, but I want to because I'm excited about this, and also probably by the time this camera even ships, it might even come in a month or so. But yeah, you're going to be able to shoot Blackmagic RAW out of the S1ii, which is great. I use a Blackmagic Pixis. I'm more than likely getting a 12K. In fact, like I'm for sure getting the Pixis 12K. And also, I might be a new owner of the Ursa 12K, depending on the time of this video. Using Blackmagic RAW is something that I'm used to. And one of the things that I didn't like about using ProRes RAW using my Atomos Ninja 5 is that I had to go through hoops just to get it to work on DaVinci Resolve. This still is only going to work using the Video Assist, and Blackmagic has to do a firmware update to that Video Assist in order to get the Blackmagic RAW external out of the S1ii. That was a mouthful. But at the same time, you are going to be able to use Blackmagic RAW on this guy, which is going to be great because there's already an amazing color fidelity coming out of this guy, and the fact that you're going to add Blackmagic RAW to it means I'm going to be able to push and pull colors even more so while externally recording. Now, the shooting modes are going to be a little bit different. I haven't tested it yet, so that's going to be a separate video all on its own. But one other thing that I'm going to talk about, and also this is something I'm going to say again slowly and maybe even hold your hand through it. If comparing cameras to an Arri are going to make you upset, I wouldn't watch this part. Now, we actually got to check out Story Hive Studios, myself and Jason Morris, while we were in Houston, Texas. And we actually got to compare the S1R to the S1ii and an Arri Alexa and see what the image quality was going to be like. Now, keep in mind, if you have good lighting, you can make any camera look really good. But we decided to put these guys side by side straight up out of curiosity just to see how things would look. Now, without having Arri Log C on any of these Lumix cameras, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you're going to be able to get an image that looks great. I'm not going to say it's going to look the same as an Arri Alexa because that would be hyperbolic. That would be a lie. However, if I took all the tags off of these guys and didn't tell you which camera it was, you might not know which one it was. Now, one thing I wanted to test out was the dynamic range, because you can get colors to match up with other cameras. People do it all the time on set, but one thing I wanted to check out was the dynamic range. So one thing that I did was I put Jason right between a garage where there's a lot of shadows, and on the other side there's a lot of highlights. On the image it looks like these highlights are blown out, but when you pull them back by just pulling our highlight slider back, you get a lot of information back on not only the S1ii but the S1R2 as well. Again, the Arri Alexa probably has more dynamic range. However, in this scenario, this is probably as dynamic as I'm gonna get. If I have a subject that's going to be in the shadows and I can still see detail, while at the same time I can still see the clouds outside, that's gonna be more than enough dynamic range for me. We wanted to do this test just out of curiosity to see how things went, and they went really well. Now, again, there's different reasons why you would have an Arri Alexa on set. However, what I will say is that this makes me feel a little less bad at the fact that I can't afford one. Oh, also, yeah, Arri Log C is going to be available for the full frame Lumix cameras, the S1ii, the S1R2, and a special camera that's going to be at the end. Last year when the GH7 came out and we were able to use Arri Log C on a short film No Good Legend, one of the things a lot of people said was that this was going to be a gimmick, and if it doesn't go to full frame, then I'm never going to use it on a micro four thirds sensor. Lumix and Arri said hold both of our beers and give us less than a year. Ooh, that rhymed. And now you can use Arri Log C on your S1ii, your S1R2, and as well as a secret camera at the end of this video. Now, again, Blackmagic Raw and Arri Log C are not things that are open just yet. They are going to be in future firmware updates, but also at the time of this video, it's going to be a little over a month until you get this shipped to you anyway. So you're probably going to get it eventually, and then probably a month or so later, you're going to be able to download that firmware update to get both of these things. I also confirmed you can't use Arri Log C and Blackmagic Raw at the same time because, well, you're shooting in RAW, so you wouldn't necessarily need to. But having both options are really good. Now, some of you guys are going to ask about the RS word, rolling shutter. I don't like talking about rolling shutter. Don't really care about rolling shutter. I almost don't care about rolling shutter almost as much as I don't care about overheating, because when I use a mirrorless camera, I'm not shooting super long takes. However, I'm going to give you the rolling shutter test. These are dumb and I don't like them. Now, as I shake the camera side to side, you'll notice that there isn't as much jello as you would find on something like the S1R2. I'm going to compare these two together in a separate video, but the jello isn't that much. Now, if under 15 milliseconds in terms of your sensor readout is going to be something that triggers you, annoys you, or something that's not up your alley, there's a big red elephant over at the Nikon booth that has global shutter, or you could spend $6,500 on the A9 III. Now, one thing that I don't mention too much in these videos is actually photography features that are going to be on this camera. Now, you get about 10 frames a second in mechanical shutter mode, but one thing I'm going to talk about is the E-shutter and some of the burst modes. Actually, just one burst mode in particular. It looks really cool. Now, when you use the electronic shutter, you can shoot up to 70 frames per second. This is a lot of frames and actually almost makes kind of a slow motion, stop motion image if you play all of them in succession. This might be really cool for fast moving objects, and the autofocus held up pretty decently as well. We took this out to a skate park in Austin, and not only we could test some of the shooting modes, but we also got to test some of the photography as well. I'm not too sure when I'm ever going to use this in real life because I don't shoot a lot of sports or fast moving objects, but it's just a really cool thing to do. In fact, one second. Okay, ready? Also, like, because you could use it in burst mode, it's just really fun to do. Like, check this out. So that's really fun. But I also will say the buffer might take a little bit of time. So if you do have a bunch of those burst shots that are on there, it might take a little while in order for you to load up all of those pictures. But that's beside the point. Actually, maybe that is probably the point. That's probably the point. Yeah, that's probably one of the caveats, actually. So we're going to go into some of the low light features of the S1ii. Now, the dual base ISO is going to be 640 and 5000. I want to test each one at either of those ISO values, and both of them are going to turn out pretty clean. The 640 is generally what I would prefer. I like using lower ISOs in low light situations, especially when you have some ambient light that you can work with. Low light doesn't mean no light. Now, I also wanted to test out the 5000 ISO as well, because obviously that's a dual base ISO, and also that's going to be the closest thing you're going to be able to get the most dynamic range out of that ISO value. Now, that all to be said, I also want to test out some of the in-betweens as well. Not highly recommended, but I did try out 1600, 3200, and 6400. You are going to get a little bit of noise in any of those guys. I also want to try out 12800. The conversation around the S1ii is that it's kind of Lumix's version of the FX3. Now, the 12800, if I was to compare it to the FX3, the FX3 is probably going to be a little bit cleaner. However, you could always just clean this stuff up with a little bit of noise reduction. That being said, while actually testing out the 12800, it's not a completely mushy mess, but there is going to be some grain in there. But then again, if you're using DaVinci Resolve 20, which you can get, and I think you get a free version, but the studio has noise reduction, you're going to be able to clean that up and get a pretty usable image. And you thought you can escape Uncle Kofi in the Ghanaian language of the day. So today we are going to talk about the low lights. So the word of the day is going to be Nsum Aba, which means it's become dark or darkness has come. This one is where you will go to your low light situation because the ambient light or maybe the light outside is not as good as the daylight. Maybe you're shooting at night like this example here. So you have to say Nsum Aba, which means that it's become dark. So that's where we can do the low light test. We can change our ISO, we can change our settings in order to make sure we get the proper exposure. Now, what I want to say as well is if you have not subscribed to the channel, if you not have subscribed to Uncle Kofi and his nephew, we are doing very big things. So I want you to make sure you press the subscribe button because where it is not dark is probably your screen. So that's where you can press the subscribe button. You can see it very easily. Mpaucho. All right, so we're going to talk about the price point of the S1ii and some of its comparables. Now, just so we're on the same page here, the S1ii is going to be priced at $31.99 US, outstanding the tariffs and all the other stuff because we don't really know what's going on just yet. Now, in my personal opinion, Lumix, I consider that a W because the S1R2, which not many people had a lot of complaints about, only has a $100 difference between the two, $100 being less on the Lumix camera. Now, in saying that, there's probably going to be people that are going to have three distinct camera bodies they're going to compare this to and then try to justify one not being the price, whatever the case might be, but I'm going to offer a little bit of perspective. Now, just to get ahead of things, because I could see the comment section going to the whole, you're getting paid by Lumix to say this, I will point out, well, one, I'm wearing my Sony Kondo robe, and two, I actually do way more things for Sony and their FX line that I get paid for than I do for Lumix in camera launches. So if there is some sort of conflict of interest, which there isn't, they don't care, I'm just gonna go out and say it. The S1ii on paper for what it can do, the shooting modes that it has, the support that it has, the internal features, and the body design offers more than the Sony FX3ii that costs $700 less. There. I said it. There's going to be a crop difference between the 4K 120 frames a second at 1.24 versus the 1.1 that's going to be in the FX3. But outside of that, I could say that in every single way, the S1ii has more to offer for the money than the Sony FX3 does. Now, that's going to get people really upset. And there's going to be points of contention there. There's going to be something about reliability probably in there somewhere because of overheating on the S1R2 and potentially overheating on the S1ii. Now, I'm happy to report mine actually has not overheated in the 3.5 weeks that I've been shooting with it almost every single day. However, there are a couple of people that might have mentioned having 6K 60 frames a second after 30 minutes overheating, to which I will ask, do you actually shoot at 6K 60 frames a second? And if you actually do on a regular basis, I want you to leave a comment down below. Exactly what are you doing? That all to be said in terms of IBIS, in terms of being able to shoot in their 4K modes, having a log profile, having Arri Log C coming to a firmware update coming up, being able to shoot Blackmagic RAW externally before the FX line did, even though it released after the fact, are all a lot of things that the S1ii can do outside of a whole bunch of other stuff like SSD recording, all the other stuff that you can't do on a Sony FX3, and the Sony FX3 is currently, at the time of this video, unless they decide to go on sale on launch day, is still $38.99, and they're still selling tons of them. Now, this camera does share a similar sensor to another brand, but I'm going to go with the Nikon Z8 first. And to be completely fair, the Nikon Z8 is $300 more, but also has a lot to offer in a stacked sensor. I'll also say the Nikon Z8 is also on sale, so we're going to have to take down the S1ii by about $300, whatever it is on B&H, to make things fair. Even despite all of that, the Nikon Z8 is still going to be $300 more money, and there's more things that the S1ii can do versus the Z8 in terms of its body design, the internal software, and some of the shooting modes that the Z8 can't do than things that the Z8 can do that the S1ii can't. Now, if you're going to go to the discussion about 8K and shooting 8K 60 frames a second, then we're going to have a logic check because just a minute ago when the S1R2 came out, everybody said 8K was overkill. And then also when the Pixis 12K came out, everyone still said 8K is overkill. So that has to be a moot point. The Z8 and the S1ii, even if they're the same price, are pretty competitive, which is also great because there's different things each can do, despite the fact that they may be the same price point, but the Z8 is more expensive. And then lastly is going to be a sensor to sensor comparison between the Nikon Z6 III and the S1ii. Why would you buy the S1ii and not the Nikon Z6 III? I actually have an entire dedicated video probably at the end of the week if you're watching this video the day that it's launched, where I found 22, I think, features that the S1 can do that the Nikon Z6 III cannot do. And if you price those about 50, 60 bucks each one, and then you put it in the Z6 III, it would cost more money than the S1 II to begin with. Now, the things that are going for the Nikon Z6 III that I'm just going to spoil the video that you can't do on the S1 II is adapt to Sony lenses, but that also requires you to buy Sony lenses too. So you have to spend money to order to use the feature, but then also buy the adapter too. So I don't know, I'm just gonna call the whole thing a wash. But you also can shoot ProRes RAW on the S1 II, which isn't my favorite version of RAW, but it's RAW nonetheless. And you're gonna get the ability to shoot in Blackmagic RAW as well externally. And eventually when that Arri Log C update comes out, it's gonna be the only mirrorless camera that can do that. On top of all the other shooting modes that, despite having the same sensor, the S1 II can do and the Nikon Z6 III can't. Now, the entire time we were on this trip, a lot of the conversation revolved around two separate things. For one, from a body perspective and some of the internals, there's not a gigantic difference between the S1 II and the S1R II, which actually I think is a really good thing. And the second thing was we really struggled to find a thing to complain about, because when we found things that were wrong, we just sounded like whiny babies nitpicking at stuff that didn't actually matter, but something that we wanted to use to impress on the audience, so we felt like we were more authentic, which actually seems more performative than it does actually being honest in a camera review. If I have to fake being mad at something just so you believe me about stuff, then that's not necessarily any more dishonest than if I lied to you. Actually, no, that's exactly, I'd be lying to you because it'd be things I don't care about. So yeah, I'm not gonna be authentic performatively, I'm just gonna tell you what my thoughts are, and that is that dollar for dollar, the S1 II does more than the other mirrorless cameras in its price point currently. And if Sony or Nikon or Canon wants to release a camera that's $3,200 bucks, $29.99 that can do more than the S1 II, then I'll have a segment just like this one, and then I'll say, Lumix, pick yourself up and figure it out. But they haven't done that yet. Oh, but also, yeah, May 24th, if you are in Toronto, you can come my Sony event. It actually is going to be free. It's at TMU, and we are going to be teaching camera basics of the Sony FX line. So there. How's that for transparency or not conflict of interest, whatever you want to call it? I don't know. Also, I decided to do a funny experiment on Threads because that's a good place to do funny experiments. And basically what I wanted to do is I took some of the features of the S1 II without saying it's the S1 II because I don't want to get sued. And I decided to put up if the FX3 Mark II was actually going to be slated for, I don't know, today. And it was going to have some of these features, the 6K open gate, the less overheating, the better readout, the ability to shoot in 4K 120 frames a second, or something else. I didn't mention every single feature. If it was the FX3 Mark II, how much money would it be, assuming the FX3 was going to be the same price? Because Sony does that. Most people put the range at around $4,500 to $5,000. Some people put $6,000 or $7,000. The S1 II is $3,199. So for me, based on the audience reaction, is that if this was a Sony camera with all the same features, less some of the other stuff that I mentioned, people would pay more money for it. So in terms of the price to value, whether or not this camera is worth it, it's kind of weird that we're going to start saying that it's going to be even more worth the price point that if it's by a different brand, and less so if it's by somebody else, which also kind of illustrates the hate that Lumix gets, which is kind of confusing because they've essentially just taken the exact same playbook out of Sony and everybody hates them for it. There, I said it. I got that off my chest. I feel better about that now. So overall, do I recommend the S1 II? Do I think it's worth the $3,199 price tag? Do I think the L mount is worth investing into? Objectively on paper, no, not yet. Because what you have to write on paper is a checklist of things that qualify for your ideal camera. Now, I'm talking to people that are actually buying, not just people that are talking and getting riled up over a camera you have no interest in purchasing. If you are actually looking for a new camera in this particular budget range, that $3,000 to $3,500 budget range, make yourself a checklist. Write down everything that you would like out of an ideal camera, and then consume as much media as humanly possible about said camera or cameras. Reason being is that buying a house, buying an engagement ring, buying a car all require a lot of research, and buying a camera is like the next expensive thing. So give it the same level of research and scrutiny when making a purchasing decision. If you don't check off some of those boxes, or if you don't check off the more boxes on the S1 II versus like an FX3, don't buy this camera. It's not going to be worth it to you. You're probably going to be upset about it because you're not checking off all your boxes. And I'm going to be real with you. Most YouTubers, especially on launch day, especially when talking about camera stuff, don't want you to buy things that are going to be a detriment to you because you could just return it and then you'll be mad at me. So two bad things are going to happen. What I will say though is that check off as many boxes as you can. If it's something that does a lot of things that you needed to do, well then absolutely I think it's going to be worth it. But if it doesn't, I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it slowly. Don't buy it. Put your money away. or just wait until the next thing comes out and then see and try your luck then. Now, if you have a hole that's burning in your pocket, you have a job that you really need to do right now, maybe circumstances are going to be a little bit different, but chances are you probably already have a camera you're working fine with. So have your own criteria, do a bunch of research, and also if you want to do even more research to find out more about it, I left more videos from some of my friends that were on that Texas trip with me, and they'll be able to tell you different things about the S1ii. For example, I'm not taking 3 hours to do an overheating test. I live in Canada. It's not going to overheat on me, or at least it's very unlikely to. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this overview of this camera. Absolutely, it's an embargo day for like 2 different cameras, maybe a lens, and also, well, where is it? Yeah, Lumix decided that instead of putting things in a firmware update in the S5 IIX, they just made another camera. That's pretty much the S5 IIX. I'm not gonna tell you about it right now. You're gonna have to wait till the next video. So, see you in the next one. Peace.
You nearly had it all when it was right